This Tuesday, October 31st, regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome to Harris Hall. Glad we were all able to make it this morning. We have a number of items on the agenda, and I'll remind Commissioners we do have a time certain this morning at, let's see, what time is it? 10 o'clock time certain this morning, so we'll work around that. Mr. Mokrzycki, any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Commissioner Bozievich.
Sorry, there is one adjustment to the agenda. Under emergency business, we're going to add an item about a letter of support for Tracktown on a 2021 grant.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Further adjustments to the agenda? I see none. Then we'll move along to the first item 2 on the agenda, which is public comments. We'll receive public comments today. I have 7 people signed up. You'll hear a bell after 3 minutes. At that point, please complete your sentence. You can take a moment to finish what it is that you're saying. You don't cut it off immediately. But be aware that there are probably other people behind you on the agenda that need to make their points also. So when you step to the microphone, please state your name and your address for the record. The first person we have signed up today is Jerry Settlemyer, who is followed by Ron Roosevelt. And please correct me on the pronunciation if I get it wrong. Jerry Settlemyer. This one I know.
That's getting pretty bad when the principal knows your name. Jerry Settlemyer, 78578 Cedar Park Road, Cottage Grove. I'm here to say there's a little bit of relief in what I feel today. I hope it's not my age, because supposedly some memories kind of fade away with age, but I better make sure that you do know that 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the generator is still running across the road from some elderly people that are not real happy with it. A second well search was abandoned yesterday for a neighbor who lost his well. The first well search was over $5,000. The second one is determined to be a dry hole too. Doesn't know what he's going to do. The Oregon Right to Farm Act is something that I hope you will consider. I know in your work session this afternoon, it is something that isn't mentioned very much, but you do have some power under the Right to Farm Act, and I hope that you will explore that. Local government can, it starts out. In your email that you received from Land Management in the 16th, I applaud the reminder to you that your #1 priority is a safe and healthy county. With a little concern, I go into vibrant communities and enterprise and business, but it can all work out. I have a good feeling. Spring's coming. My old age says that spring will come. I hope I'm here when it comes. Spring usually is accompanied by those great, fresh, nice new smells. Oops, that may not be good for us. The marijuana plants will come back, and probably along with them, the smell too. Thank you, gentlemen, for being real serious about helping to take care of us. It's very appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Settlemyer. Next is Ron Roosevelt, followed by Kathy Walker.
Thank you. My name is Ron Rouseville. I would like to talk about marijuana grows, specifically one grow on Cedar Park Road in Cottage Grove. This marijuana grow is not a normal agricultural crop. One grow has created a cartel-like atmosphere in the neighborhood. The stench is terrible, and some neighbors have lost their wells. Threats have been made such as, you think it stinks now, wait until we move in another 40 to 100,000 plants next year. We don't care about the neighbors. I will make it a pig farm. The grow requires armed guards with AR-15 rifles, which they have been very proud to announce to the neighbors that they will protect their crop with. Convoys are guarded front and rear while moving product from other sites. The AR-15 weapons they are using, according to the NRA, has a dangerous range of approximately 2.2 miles. This range is calculated from one grow on Cedar Park Road, puts literally hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens at risk from an errant round or rounds, should an altercation occur. The following is just a partial list of places within the 2.2 mile danger zone. There are many more. Harrison School, Cottage Grove Airport, Stewart Park, Cottage Grove Police Department, Dairy Queen, Elks Lodge, McDonald's, South Lane School District Main Office, Warren Doherty Swimming Pool, Walmart, Bi-Mart, Sears, Safeway, I-5, Cedar Park Road, north and south. Once again, these are not normal agricultural crops. Health effects from the stench, long and short term, are not known. Water usage was not studied prior to issuance of permits. Marijuana grows of this magnitude should not be allowed within 2.2 miles of residential sites due to safety concerns from firearms. There have been numerous complaints reported to El Rapa regarding the skunky stench. OLCC has commented that this should not be allowed to happen in residential neighborhoods. This just isn't right. One Grow has turned a nice community into a miserable place to live, with some residents wanting to sell their property and leave the area. Residents are afraid property values have declined. I have lived at my current residence on Cedar Park Road for almost 44 years and never imagined that something like this could happen in my neighborhood. I believe state and county agencies have been remiss in their duty to provide due diligence in granting permits for these sites that have not been properly examined. Are you going to wait to change the law until an innocent child is killed by an errant round from an AR-15 rifle? If a tragedy should happen, the state and county should be responsible. We need a moratorium on these sites until the above items can be properly addressed by the state and county. I implore you to get these sites away from residential neighborhoods. Do the right thing. Put them where they belong, far away from residential areas. Take back your county. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Kathy Walker, followed by Cindy Biles.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Kathy Walker, and I'm here on behalf of several of my unhoused friends, both alive and dead. I grew up in Santa Clara, and I support any serious efforts that might save their lives. Nearly 40 people have died since January of 2016 that were unhoused. They had no shelter options. Christy Hunt, 26 years old, mother of one. Joshua Ty Turnage, 32 years old, father of one. Hunter Hand, father of one. He was 26, I believe. And just 2 weeks ago, Michael Greenwald, father of a beautiful daughter. Michael's last post on Facebook reads, "The biggest fight you will ever have is between who you are now and who you are capable of becoming. Please consider the temperature at 4 o'clock this morning. 30 degrees with no legal place to sleep will devastate those citizens. Please act on this pilot program quickly. It still won't save them all, but at least a few more will have a chance to be the people they're capable of being." Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Next is Cindy Biles, followed by Ed McMahon.
My name is Cindy Biles. I live in the city, and as we begin to understand how the game is rigged against us, with the top scooping it up, we need to look at how we need to scrutinize that, because as we are middle managers of the place, we can't just assume that the other guys have got it right. We've got, assume is make an ass of you and me, assume. So we need to talk about how we're going to build our house. And on a material level, we need to think about these pre-laminated timber that supposedly is going to be used to build a parking garage in Glenwood and a low housing complex somewhere, and think about the low income housing in London that went up in smoke, and who's rigging the game. So they're going to build a low housing with laminated timber, and when it's time to push the button to let it go up and fire, that's what's going to happen. If we care about reforming our government and reforming ourselves, we must look at ourselves, and forgive ourselves and try to go from there and think about our common sense and think about how we're building our house like the three little pigs did. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Biles. Next is Ed McMahon, followed by Chris, and I'm going to mess this last name up, Ms. Salitsu. Ms. McMahon.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ed McMahon, and I'm proud to be the Executive Director of the Home Builders Association of Lane County, located at 1065 River Road, Eugene. I have an expectation that we can all agree that the current housing crisis is a critical community problem. One of our association's primary goals reads, advocacy for affordable housing choices for all citizens. That primary goal is the reason I'm before you today. Know that our association wants to participate in solving the housing crisis. I'd like to begin by asking a question. If we agree that the current housing crisis is a critical community problem, then why should we place the burden of financing various housing solutions on only the housing industry? It's a community crisis, so shouldn't the entire community participate in the solution? I'm referring to tomorrow's work session when you'll be discussing the construction excise tax. Allow me to explain how the construction excise tax will affect the local housing affordability problem. One of the often overlooked impacts of regulations like this is their effect on housing affordability. Every time a government issues a construction regulation, it raises construction cost. Higher costs translate into higher home prices, and higher prices in turn disqualify more families from being able to afford to buy their first home. Our National Association Economics relies on the priced out model to evaluate the effects of pending new regulations on housing affordability in local markets. The model estimates how many households can qualify for a mortgage before and after the price increase. The resulting difference is the number of families priced out of buying their first home. In the Eugene-Springfield area, every $1,000 increase in home prices leads to pricing out 266 families from purchasing their first home. If you could visualize a tubular balloon and the bottom of that balloon's affordable housing, when you release the pressure there, it simply moves the pressure up to the next step. So I'd very much like to send you more information on this proven methodology of the priced out effect. If you're interested, please let me know. Be happy to do so, and look forward to your work session tomorrow. Let's find a community solution to this community problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMahon. Next is Chris, followed by Beth Poole. Oh, Chris.
Mr. Chair, esteemed commissioners, my name is Chris McAllister. I live in 1909 12th Street, Springfield, Oregon. I am on the Poverty and Homeless Board, as well as represent Springfield Shelter Rights Alliance, and I'm on the Mayor of Eugene's Permanent Shelter Task Force. With this in mind, I wanted to share a couple items. One is that the PHB has been working on expanding car camping, and we have a strategic plan. And if you look on that plan on page 7 of the 9-page plan, you'll see that goal 1.2, I believe section C, asks for 40 parking spots to be increased for people who are living in their cars. Now, this pilot project that's going to come before you today meets part of that goal, but does not meet all of it. So we have a very diverse group of needs in regards to trying to overcome homelessness. And with that in mind, I ask that you support this pilot project, but also open up the pathway for us to be able to do more pilot sites within the county lands, and also work with the cities. Because like this morning, very cold, very problematic, but we're working on steps forward. And with that in mind, I appreciate all that you guys do, and both with your support for the plan and with the county staff who were able to be creative. Now is the time to be creative, not restrictive, because we have people who suffer. If we want to be taking time, we should do this, the small projects in the summer. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks for your tireless work on housing issues. The last person we have signed up today is Beth Poole.
Good morning. Happy Halloween. I don't know if that's a costume, but it looks great. I'm Beth Poole, 78628 Cedar Park Road, Cottage Grove. After reading this morning the agenda for this afternoon, I changed a bit of what I was anticipating saying. First off, I want to say that I applaud and appreciate that the land use management report addressed our concerns and analyzed them. And as Jerry Settlemyer said, it is reassuring to see that the county's #1 goal is to secure or maintain a safe and healthy county. However, due to the initial light touch that the county enforced in regulations for marijuana grow sites in the county, there are a few considerations that I'd like you to pursue this afternoon and beyond. One is, can the county place a freeze on all permits that are in the queue coming up? I think we had proposed a moratorium, and we were said a moratorium cannot be made, but could a freeze within the department be placed? Let's see. For safety's sake, could, in using the F2 zoning or RR zonings, could marijuana grows be forbidden 2.2 miles from any residential areas? Let's see. So we've read state documents as they pertain to county level, and a state legislator has informed us, which confirmed what we read in documents, that marijuana is an agricultural crop. The land use called it a farm crop. It's not really a farm crop. It's an ag crop, just like grasses are not a farm crop, they're an ag crop. But the right to farm does not apply to marijuana grows statewide. So the city, and so because marijuana does not have a right to farm, the county's, the perceived county's inability to make changes on the setbacks do not apply. The county does have the ability, the authority to change the setbacks from 100 feet perimeter to 1,000 feet perimeter or more. One thing that the land management report did not address was changes to the zoning grid. F2 zones can be changed at the county level, and pertaining to the document from the county. So because that was not addressed by land use management, that is something that we'd appreciate if you could have staff consider again the zoning of addressing the rezoning of F2 and deny marijuana grows within F2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I ask for Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrances, I will ask, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Board of County Commissioners? If so, please step forward. Please step to the mic and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Petroni. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dave Piccioni, and I live on Van Buren between 6th and 7th. And I just want to address, I wasn't going to talk today, but I heard some stuff talked about marijuana, and I just wanted to show what I know about it. And if you look at the biggest body of literature in the world is the Vedas. It comes from India, out of which the briefer version is the Upanishads, and out of that came out the Bhagavad Gita, from which Hinduism and other religions developed. The word bang, out of which Bangladesh, Bangkok is the prefix which means marijuana. These plants were so prevalent in Asia that when the war on drugs took over and we started cutting down the plants and spraying herbicide on them, they had terrible soil erosion. You do not need any chemicals to grow it. And if if the person that was talking about the AR-15s, I mean, that's obviously a problem of protecting it. If there was more of it available, there wouldn't be such a need to protect it with such vigor. Anyway, what I really wanted to say was I don't enjoy pot. I don't smoke it. I haven't in probably 22 years. But I do know that some people like it and some people don't. There are similarities and there are differences between people. And you can't say to one person that this is not good for you if they're enjoying it. It may not be good for you. It may not be good for me. It may not be good for all of you. But if it's good, if it's especially medicinally you never know what's going to happen in your life if you're going to get cancer, glaucoma, or some other painful rheumatoid arthritis or something, and you might need that medicine. So, you know, to be so forceful against marijuana is not a very smart move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petroni. Would anyone else today wish to address the Board of County Commissioners? I see none. Just to mention that item 12C this afternoon, probably sometime around 2 o'clock, we will be taking up the issue of county responsibilities and authority regarding marijuana and marijuana grows. So to the commissioners, commissioners' response to public comments and or other remonstrances. I see none. Then I'm just going to, item of levity, Ms. Pulley asked about what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a county commissioner's suit, which was worn in 1893, which coincidentally my Pepsi Cola is from 1893. So, it actually, I tried to find something that looked like a county commissioner. This is as close I got. It's more like Andrew Jackson, which was significantly before 1893. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I will mention, Mr. McAllister, thank you for your testimony regarding your work, your extensive work on housing and finding ways to add new doors in Lane County. And Mr. McMahon, the same thing. Thank you for your work adding new front doors in Lane County. Then we'll move along to the next item on the agenda. Next is emergency business. We actually have 3 items. One was added of emergency business. And Mr. Mokrahajski, correct me if I'm wrong, the emergency business is such because it was added to the agenda subsequent to the initial posting of today's agenda.
Correct. We have 2 items 4A, 1 and 2 that will be taken up after the new emergency item of the day regarding a letter of support for Tracktown, a Tracktown grant proposal. But the 2 items that are on the agenda were posted, I believe, over the weekend. I don't recall exactly, but I think it was on Saturday. We posted both those items. This item that you'll hear right now, and Mr. Kyler is passing out copies of, and he'll read to you, was not posted because it just came to us here in the course of the last day. And so we're bringing it forward to the board to discuss a letter of support for a grant proposal for Tracktown USA.
Thank you, Ms. Mokrahajski. And you know something? I don't know why Hiram Nielsen didn't have a media pocket in 1893. There's no place to put my phone. What's up with that? So, Mr. Kyler, you have today a letter. Thank you for writing this on short notice. Tracktown USA has asked us to provide a letter of support for the 2021 games. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Bozievich to cover this.
Actually, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Alex to maybe read the letter for the board, and then we can discuss it from there.
Sure. Thanks, Commissioners. This letter is a request for to support an application that the Oregon 21 is the group that I believe is a subsidiary or affiliated with Tracktown. They're applying for a large tourism grant from the Travel Oregon Commission. The funding comes from a recent increase in the transient room tax that occurred in the 2016 legislature. It was championed by one of our representatives to create a pot of money to help bolster large events that are coming to the state. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the letter. It's dated today to the Grants Manager of Travel Oregon. Dear Travel Oregon Grants Manager, I'm writing on behalf of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to share with you our support of the Oregon 21 Local Organizing Committee as they apply for a Travel Oregon competitive large grant. Lane County has been integrally involved with the track and field events hosted at Hayward Field since the Olympic trials returned to Eugene in 2008. Starting in 2005, the efforts to rally Lane County communities around the plans and preparations for the trials was truly a collaborative one. Now, 12 years later, we have seen both national and international events stream into our area with consistent frequency. These efforts have been successful in part because of the investment of public dollars from the legislature, Oregon state agencies, and local government. Tracktown has become a known destination for athletes and tourists alike, and the positive impact from these events is not only within Eugene. In particular, the 2021 event will bring athletes to Oregon earlier in order to acclimate, and the breadth of teams participating will mean additional opportunities for local communities to provide pre-event training facilities. Every track facility in Lane County will be utilized, and every city will have new visitors. There is no doubt that our local economy will benefit, and the visitor dollars spent in our communities for overnight stays will generate tourism tax dollars that we will reinvest to provide ongoing benefit to the tourism industry and local infrastructure to support tourism. We recognize this as a phenomenal opportunity that will touch Oregonians statewide. The Travel Oregon grant funds will create additional investments in communities across Oregon, as well as promoting statewide attractions and facilities. Lane County will be ready to help the Commission with any additional information to support a larger grant for this event. Our experience with previous Tracktown-related events suggests this event will continue to exceed expectations. We are confident that our community will be prepared for this event and that your decision to invest in Oregon 21 will continue to grow tourism employment, visitor spending, and local transient lodging revenues. And then we would sign it. It would be signed by Commissioner Farr, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. And note, I did put it on your individual letterhead, Commissioner. In the final, I think this would, if you approve this letter, it will go on Board of County Commissioners letterhead. Just to be clear.
We got an approval today. Commissioner Lyken has been our lead working on the 2021 games. He's attended virtually all of the meetings. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, to me, this is a pretty easy letter to support. One of the things, and I think that's important to make note, this is the first time in the history of the World Track and Field Games it'll be on American soil, which is pretty incredible right here in our hometown. But one of the things they make note of is incorporating all the state of Oregon. And when I sat down and discussed this with Vin Lanana, he talked about, because you're talking about roughly 220 countries around the world that will be descending here, Lane County and Eugene. And each country has, they may have sea level, they may be in the mountains. It depends on training. So can you imagine I think it's in Kenya he was talking about, they train in higher elevation, which is likely they may be training in Central Oregon. So Redmond will all of a sudden, or Bend will get folks from around the world training in their community. The coast will get athletes from around the world training in their community. So it really, I think it's very exciting, and it has a great opportunity really to showcase our community, and I look forward to it. And so I think this is a great letter, and that I'm hopeful the board will strongly support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lyken. Further comments on the letter? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to thank Mr. Lyken for his comments and add just a little bit to that. I know that in some of the communities such as Cottage Grove, these types of opportunities are a real boon to the local economy. And frankly, in my experience of city and county government for the last 20 years, this appears to me to be pretty much unparalleled in opportunity from anything that we've had opportunity to participate in before. So this is a wonderful thing. Thank you for the letter. I think it's a great opportunity for not only Lane County, but indeed the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Further comments? Commissioner Bozievich.
So I'd just like to move that the board authorize the chair to sign this letter on behalf of the board in support of the Oregon 21 Local Organizing Committee's grant application to Travel Oregon.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen. Discussion to the motion. I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Mr. Kyler, is that everything you need today regarding the letter?
Thank you.
Then the board will continue with emergency business with items 4A, 1 and 2, which are orders 17-1031-08 and -09. For this discussion and this action, I will disqualify to avoid conflict of interest. Following the stroke of the gavel, I will be surrendering the chair to Vice Chair Commissioner Bozievich. Subsequent to the discussion and potential action on 17-1031-09, I will retain the chairmanship of the board. I will be recused.
So we will take up item 4A1, which is Order 17-1031-08, in the matter of approving the tentative agreement between Lane County and the Lane County American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 2831 General Unit for the years 2017 through 2020. And I will ask the administrator to start this item. And I see we have the whole bargaining team here again, which is great to see them. So
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. First, I'll do brief introductions. To my left is Inga Wood, our Interim Human Resource Director and Labor Relations Manager. Andrea Nagels, our Assistant County Counsel. Mary Miller, our Wellness and Benefits Manager. And Kristen Mayfair is our Labor Relations Program Specialist. Christine Moody, I think over there, is our Budget Manager. And then Jocelyn Warren, our Public Health Manager. These are representatives of the county's bargaining team. I also want to acknowledge AFSCME's bargaining team members. I believe we have Larisse Rivera, who's the president of AFSCME, who's here with us, and Charity Aguirre from AFSCME's bargaining unit as well in the audience, and want to appreciate both members of the AFSCME bargaining team for being here today. They've taken time out of their busy schedule and use their personal time to be here and represent the interests of the bargaining unit. And I also want to recognize Pat Dotson, Brad Carpenter, Lori Green, Nick Alviani, Connie Perry, Christine Yonkers, and Jennifer Young, who are also members of the AFSCME bargaining unit for their work. And so both the county's bargaining team and AFSCME's bargaining team, I want to just take a brief moment to recognize all of these individuals. There have been many late nights for officials both in the county's bargaining team and AFSCME's bargaining team over the past several weeks, going past midnight, all-nighters. These are folks who are giving of their time and not being compensated for it to try to reach agreement, and certainly a commitment on both sides to find a settlement and get our employees back to work. And so I want to just appreciate all of the folks on both sides of the bargaining table who got us to where we are today. So, Mr. Chair, just a brief introduction. I want to turn it over to Inga Wood. On October 17th, 2017, the board approved a 3-year contract for both AFSCME units. The majority of those terms are still in effect, and those include a 2% cost of living adjustment each year for 3 years. Employees will begin moving to 3 health insurance plans effective January 1, 2018, and then we'll talk about the changes that will be made in a moment, but I'm just representing what is consistent with the board's approved action of 2 weeks ago. Market adjustments for classifications that were previously approved. Part-time employees will receive employee-only health insurance with the option to purchase full family coverage. And one of the board's desires throughout this process is that we be consistent in our approach on those major points related to cost of living adjustments, health insurance plans, and market adjustments. And so these contracts represent consistency on those major points with all the bargaining units. We're also now going to highlight the items that have changed with the tentative agreements that were approved last Tuesday evening and ratified by both AFSCME units on Thursday and Friday. These contracts, these tentative agreements represent approximately $200,000 more than what had previously been approved by the Board of Commissioners. That's about a little over 0.1% of the total value of these contracts over 3 years. And I'll turn it over to Inga Wood to walk through the changes, and then I'll have some closing comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Bozovich and Commissioners, apologize, under the weather today, so hopefully it was not coughing in the middle. In the board packets in front of you, there's a summary of the changes attached to the board memo and a full red line version of the contracts that we're asking the board to approve today. I'll highlight, as Steve mentioned, the changes from the October 17th documents that you already approved. Included in the packet is an MOU to review market wages for classifications requested by AFSCME in both of the midterm years for the general unit. Classifications requested cannot constitute more than 10% of the total number of employees in the general unit each year. There's also an MOU to review market wages for all nurse classifications for the second year of the contract. Under both of these MOUs, memorandums of understanding, a panel review process has been built. And if the parties cannot reach the appropriate adjustments, the panel's recommendations will be presented to the Board of County Commissioners for the final decision. Also included, as Steve mentioned, the changes to the health insurance. Effective January 1st, 2018, employees in both units will choose from 3 health insurance options. They'll choose from the high deductible health plan, the Prime Plus plan, and the copay plan. And then contributions for those plans will begin on July 1st, 2018. Included also in these packets for the nurses unit are additional continuing education hours for nurse practitioners, dental hygienists, and physician assistants, an MOU to provide a one-time payment of $100,000 for a hardship fund for AFSCME to distribute to their members as necessary, and an MOU establishing a quarterly review of part-time positions through a joint labor management committee. The additional budget impact of the general unit contract over this 3-year period is estimated at $7.45 million for all funds. This is an increase of approximately $150,000 over the implemented offer on October 17th. The additional budget impact for the nurses contract over a 3-year period is estimated at $1.59 million for all funds. This is an increase of approximately $50,000 over the implemented offer on October 17th. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Any further presentation from the bargaining team on the contracts? So with that, Commissioner Sorensen.
I'll just request if the union can also come up and just say a few words about the tentative agreement.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Laurice Rivera. I'm the president of AFSCME Local 2831, Lane County, and I proudly represent almost 700 members of AFSCME here at Lane County. We are happy to be back to work today serving the community we care for. We are devoted to our jobs because we are committed to helping this community. It is the reason we work at Lane County. I am happy we were able to come to this agreement. It made movement in the right direction in regards to pay equity. While it is in the right direction, there is still work to be done. It is still my hope that one day we can reach a point where no AFSCME member, no employee of Lane County has to seek public assistance to live in Lane County. Pay was not the only reason we went on strike. Respect played into the decision for many who chose to strike. I am encouraged by the show of respect towards our expanded practice dental hygienist. This is the title that they deserve to be called, what their credentials call for, and I think this is the right direction, and I'm very encouraged by that. The last point I really want to stress is that every employee, from custodian to clinician to county administrator, every employee brings value to this county. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. So, any further comments from the board? Commissioner Lyken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't have a comment, but do you want us to? My question would be: do you want to comment on each before we make a motion, or how do you want to, how to, and I'll look to Vice Chair Bozovich on this as well. Do you, what is it, how do you want us to approach this?
I think we'll need two separate motions, for one for each contract. And I was looking towards staff. I think they commented on both contracts at the same time, so I don't think we need to.
I just want to double check on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of Order 17-10-31-08 in the matter of approving the tentative agreement between Lane County and the Lane County American Federation of State and County Municipal Employees Local 2831 General Unit for the 2017 through 2020 contract.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen to approve the AFSCME General Unit contract. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Acting Chair and Vice Chair. I am really happy that after months of hard work by all involved, that we're able to have not only a tentative agreement that's presented today, but a tentative agreement that's been approved by the workers and their bargaining team and bargaining unit. And to me, this is the right path for us to follow, where we have a bargaining where both sides are represented by really capable people and work hard and try to work through the thousands, maybe even millions of details that are encompassed by how do you fairly compensate 600-700 people that are all different levels of experience, all different levels of types of jobs, some of which have local competitors or comparables, some of which don't, and without going into all the thousands of hours spent on this, I'll just say I'm really glad that we're concluding this today by approving the tentative agreement. And I'm sorry that it took so long, and I'm sorry it took such a toll on people on all sides, but I'm also happy that we're here today and we're able to say, well, after months of negotiations and mediation, a strike, more mediation, more discussion, that we're able to come to today. So I just want to thank everyone involved.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just, Commissioner Sorensen, I just want to say thank you for thinking, make sure to allow the union leadership to come and make a statement. I just want to say appreciate it and appreciate your comments very much. And so Commissioner Sorensen, thank you for noting that. Sometimes I'm just too straightforward business. My apologies, but that was a good gesture. So I appreciate that. Good job to our negotiating team as well, and to all involved. And on the rest, I will just ditto what Commissioner Sorensen stated. Thank you.
So I, first want to extend my thanks to both bargaining teams. As Mr. Mokrahajski noted, you guys spent some late nights and sometimes all nights at the bargaining table. I also want to thank my fellow board members who came in on odd days, including a Sunday. And I think Commissioner Sorensen, who is our longest serving board member, does not remember ever meeting on a Sunday as the Board of Commissioners. So there was quite a commitment on behalf of the board to continue the negotiations and keep things moving forward to the point where we came in on weekends and early in the morning, in the evenings. At one point, because I had to be in Salem all day, we had an evening executive session. So it was quite the effort on both sides to try and keep things moving ahead, and it's great to be at this point of having a tentative agreement that we can now vote to approve. I want to thank Larice and on her comments. All of our employees are here to serve. And I really agree with her from, the custodian on up to the administrator. And, I've talked about this publicly before, even, when we were getting ready to vote on an implementation, how much we value our employees and really doing some great work in our community. And I get to go out and talk about the great work that you guys do all the time, and it makes me proud. And I love going to state functions like at AOC and talk about the work we're doing in justice reinvestment and the work we're doing in our health and human services clinics, the work we're doing with Poverty and Homelessness Board. All of that comes down to line staff that support those efforts and how valuable all those employees are to moving Lane County forward and some of the great work we do. So really appreciate your comments, Larice, and I hope we can move forward all understanding that that's our general goal here. Whether we have disagreements about contract language and bits and pieces there, ultimately we're all looking to serve the people of Lane County and make Lane County a better place to live for everyone. So in that we're united and that we all have value and all of our citizens have value. So with that, if there's no further comments, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of Order 1710-3108 in approving the tentative agreement with the AFSCME General Unit, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Farr recused. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of Order 17-10-31-09 in the matter of approving the tentative agreement between Lane County and Lane County American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Local 2831 Nurses Unit for 2017 through 2020 contract.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen to approve the tentative agreement for the AFSCME Nurses Unit. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Sorensen.
Once again, I'd like to just thank everyone involved in the process. I just want to take a minute to express my perspective on our policies that we've been using with all of the bargaining units, in fact, all the employees, to use a 5-county comparator system. And I think that this contract in particular shows why the 5-county comparator system, coupled with recognition of local economic conditions, makes a lot of sense. In other words, it's not simply, well, what's the local economic condition? And it's not just the 5-county comparators. It's a combination of the two, and it's a subject of collective bargaining that leads us to the contract today. And so those 5 counties, are 2 Portland counties, Washington County, and Clackamas County, and of course the Salem area, Marion County. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you just use Marion County? It's more like Lane County. Don't use those big Portland counties. That's all by Portland. Well, A, we're not using Portland. We're using the suburban counties. And B, we're balancing them with 2 other counties that aren't even anywhere close to either Eugene or Portland, and that is Jackson County, Medford area, and Deschutes County, Bend. So we're balancing the Portland suburban counties with the more rural counties that have, in the Portland suburban counties have higher wages, and the rural counties have lower wages. And so we're balancing those 4 with one that's very similar to us economically, namely Marion County. But even that 5-county comparator doesn't really do the job, because we know that in certain occupations, maybe that's people that run computers, maybe that's people who are nurses, as in this case. Maybe there are local comparators that are at play in the decision of people to go, well, gee, maybe I'll go across the street to the city of Eugene. Maybe I'll go to a major healthcare provider. We know that Kaiser is expanding into our community. We know that OHSU is expanding into our community. We already have Peace Health and Mackenzie Willamette. So we already have a lot of other employers, not to mention all the offices, medical offices that maybe are similar to some of the work that our office nurses do in our clinic. So I think that we're best by holding firm to our 5-county comparator as the basis, the starting point. But I also think we have to look at local conditions. And I think in this case that was done. And I'm glad that we reached this agreement. But I just want to give my perspective on how do I reconcile the 5-county comparators. It's the 5-county comparators with a specific contract like this, where we are also trying to look at the impact of local economic conditions. So I think that was done in this case, and I'm, again, happy that we reached agreement.
Thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote on Order 1710-3109 in the matter of approving the AFSCME Nurses Unit contract. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Farr recused. And Mr. Mokrzycki, you had a comment?
I'll just hold until my announcements, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I will call Chair Farr back to the podium now that we're finished with those two items, and turn the chair back to Chair Farr.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Thank you, Board, for deliberating in my absence. We have two items. We have one item, excuse me. We have a time certain at 10 a.m., and we do have before us a consent calendar. And I'd like to ask Mr. Mokrzycki and the Board, we have item 9B, which is a short item, and I've checked with the 10 a.m. time certain to see if we could push that a little bit later. That way, county staff, that item would otherwise most likely get pushed to the afternoon, and that places a hardship on county staff. So with the consent of the Board, we'll move item 9B prior to the time certain, immediately following the consent calendar. Okay, and I've checked with the county staff and the posse member. So, very good. Then we do have before us the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted by one single motion in the form listed on our agenda. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion had been desired, the item would have been pulled from the consent calendar. For the consent calendar, do I have a motion? Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'll move approval of the October 31st, 2017 consent calendar.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozovich, seconded by Commissioner Lyken. Discussion to the motion? I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Then we will move to directly to item 9B, which is Order 1710-3107, in the matter of delegating authority to the county administrator to execute amendments to ground lease option agreements for county-owned real property along 6th Avenue in downtown Eugene. And today, Mr. Mokrzycki and Mr. Kreiner is with us.
Mr. Kreiner.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying to get my credibility back after Saturday. After my one Ducks game I went to. So
We have dueling ties today.
Thank you for accommodating the schedule and bumping this item up. I appreciate it. Brian Kreiner, your Capital Projects Manager. I'm here today to discuss an item that's got some history to it, so I'm going to do a brief run through on that history and some of the context for what we are here to consider. As many of you may recall, October 29th, 2012, the county issued an RFP for surplus property along 6th Avenue in downtown Eugene, consisting primarily of surface parking lots and the site of the recently demolished county annex building. On February 26th of 2013, the board reviewed RFP responses and determined that HAXA, as well as the Market District LLC, is affiliated with Fifth Street Market, were the successful respondents based on their joint proposal for the properties. November 5th, 2013, after some months of negotiation, the board reviewed draft option agreements and they set a public hearing for consideration of entering into those draft option agreements. And then on November 12th of that year, we held a public hearing and the board delegated authority to the county administrator to enter into those option agreements. So on December 13th of 2013, we entered into those option agreements, and they're 48-month option agreements, which has the term ending December 13th of this year. As part of those option agreements, there were several milestones that the optionees needed to fulfill. Within 18 months, optionees were to hold 3 public forums, which they did. And within 24 months, the optionees were to submit design guidelines to the board for approval, which they also did. And then within 36 months, the optionees were to submit a use and development plan to the board, which they did last year, at the end of last year. So the last remaining milestone that they need to reach before the end of the 48-month term, which is currently set for December this year, is to apply for permit for their developments. So with regard to the milestones and the design work to date, all the work's been proceeding diligently, and we've been really encouraged by the collaboration between the two partners. Unfortunately, outside of the control of the partners has been some of the funding that HACS has been focused on in terms of the affordable housing piece for the development. So from the outset, HACS has been working towards a 2017 low-income housing tax credit application through the state. Unfortunately, given some speculation in the housing tax credit market, those credits weren't sold at the same prices as was anticipated. So in late 2016, they were experiencing anywhere from 10 to 20 cents on the dollar discount on those, and projects that were in the 2016 pipeline suddenly faced a gap of $1 to $2 million around the state. So the state decided to, rather than issue new grants in 2017, was to fill those gaps and make whole some of those 2016 applications, and there wasn't a funding cycle in 2017. So that's caused HACS to focus on the 2018 funding round. As part of that, they're going to require, or they have requested, that the lease option term be extended another year to facilitate that application. We as staff have been encouraged again by the collaboration and the progress made to date. Given the resources that both partners have placed into the project and their collaborative approach and the desire to bring them online, we think it's wholly appropriate that we grant them another year for the lease option term. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for discussion. With us is Casey Barrett with the Market District LLC, and I was quickly trying to text Jacob Fox and Steve Oakes to try to get them over here, but I'm not sure if they've made it just yet. So,
very well. Thank you, Mr. Kreiner. Questions or comments regarding the item? I've seen Commissioner Bozievich.
I'll just make one comment so the public understands. This is something that's also been discussed at the Housing Authority Board. So, the board members here also sit as 5 of the 7 Housing Authority Board members. So we are, well aware of the tax credit market issues and the need for this delay on the Housing Authority's part. So if we're not, so the public understands why there may not be as many questions about that from the board. It's because we've already sat through several meetings and been apprised of that in public meetings that are also available, minutes and recordings are available to the public. But we have been apprised of the details behind this and the financial issues that have made this necessary for HACSA to request this extension.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. You covered that pretty well, and I don't see Jacob or David, so we'll probably move forward without their presence. And you do have 5 of the HACSA board members here. The issue surrounding tax credits is one that is affecting our ability to move forward with low-income housing on more than just the HACSA front. Having to pay or getting credits for 4% instead of what we'd hope to be 9% in some cases creates a much larger funding gap, which needs to be addressed before we can move forward with some of the projects that we're launching at the bit, so to speak, to move forward with. So, any further discussion? Commissioner, yes. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But there's one big difference, though. We are the Board of Commissioners, which means we're associated with United Front as the Board of Commissioners, and HACSA is not. And frankly, with tax reform going on right now, I think this is a really good time to really get Smith, Dawson, and Andrews to really get engaged to see where this is going, because this issue is going to be right in the middle of the tax reform conversation that's going to be happening right now. And I believe they're unveiling it tomorrow. The House is, Chair Brady, the House Ways and Means Committee, I believe, is unveiling their kind of scope tomorrow, so it'll be kind of interesting to see. I don't know if hopefully Mr. Kyler's listening, and to maybe have Mr. Kyler get engaged with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews. This is the nice thing. While we're 5 of the 7 on the HACSA board as the commissioners, we actually have a contract with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews, where as HACSA commissioners, we do not. And so it'd be pretty interesting just to make sure that if Mr. Kyler can be engaged with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews on this particular piece on where this is going when they start having this conversation on tax reform. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for that clarification. As HACSA members, we have no discussion with the county. HACSA is a separate board completely from the county, with its own council, with its own operating rules, with its own agendas, etc. Commissioner Sorensen.
I just wanted to ask that question about the deductibility on individuals' federal income tax of state and local taxes. And is that issue involved in this at all? My understanding is that the Republican leadership in Congress, some, want to get rid of that deduction, and that legislators, members of Congress from states that have high local taxes, either high state income tax, maybe like New York State, or maybe high local property taxes like Oregon, would be opposed to that because they want to keep that deduction available for their residents. Is that involved in this issue, or is this more of a state tax credit issue that we've been mostly familiar with and dealing with HACSA?
And we understand, Mr. Cronin, that's not your area particularly of expertise.
Yeah, it's my understanding, based on our conversations with HACSA, that the issue is tied to tax reform, not in the sense that tax reform is seeking to repeal that tax credit, as we understand it, but that the demand for those tax credits will likely be less if the income, if taxes,
federal taxes,
particularly for those in higher income brackets, are reduced, there would be less of a need for those individuals to pursue these tax credits. So
these Oregon tax credits?
No, it's federal.
This is a federal program.
Right.
Yeah. So it is administered through a state agency. Right. So there certainly are ties to the state, but I think the concern is more that the demand for these tax credits on a national level will shrink if there's significant tax reform that lowers the tax burden for the wealthiest.
Thank you.
You covered that very well, Ms. Smoker-Heisky. The fact is that people would have less appetite for tax credits if their taxes aren't in excess of their desire to pay. Excellent. Anything further, Mr. Craner?
Nothing further other than to say we'll look forward to sometime at the beginning of next year bringing forward another presentation showing the latest in the planning and design. So we're excited for that.
Thank you for coming on short notice, and thank you, Mr. Barrett, for being here in case any questions came up. So we have before us Order 17-10-3107 in the matter of delegating authority, etc. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Bozievich.
I'll move approval of the order.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. I see none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that item 9B is completed. And we'll go back to very briefly on item 6A, which was scheduled to be heard before the 10 a.m. time certain, will commence subsequent to the 10 a.m. time certain. And I would estimate that sometime close to 11 o'clock, this is just a rough estimate, is when we'll get back to item 6A. So we'll move forward with item 7A, which is under Public Works, Order 17-10-3106, in the matter of recognizing the contributions of the partnerships with the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, Friends of Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, and the Sheriff's Mounted Posse in providing stewardship of the Howard Buford Recreation Area. And today, Ms. Smoker-Heisky, we have Mr. Mike Russell with us. And I'm going to take just 1 second while everybody's seated to thank Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell, thank you. Today is your last day of service with Lane County. And after how many years? And I'm just going to say this right now, and I may have more to add. When I first became a county commissioner, your already full plate was filled even greater by adding animal services to your work and other things to your work. And my personal work with you through the years, I've admired greatly the work that you've done, sometimes under great duress. And it's been my pleasure, Mr. Russell, to work with you for all these years. Thank you. Mr. Mokrahisi.
Mr. Chair, thank you for those comments, and I also wanted to just recognize Mike here at his last board meeting and to say that Mike has been with Lane County for 19 years. He started off, as so many good things have come through transportation planning. Mike Russell is one of those. He started in transportation planning 19 years ago. He worked through the roads department and engineering and road maintenance, and then joined the Parks Division in 2012. He's been active with the Public Works Employee Association and a stalwart involved in our diversity efforts, both in the Public Works Department and countywide. And Mr. Chair, you talked about how he's taken on animal services as that function has bounced around, and all the work in our Parks Division over the last several years. And I too want to express on behalf of Lane County and the Public Works team our appreciation for your outstanding service to Lane County.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I appreciate that. It's been an honor to serve the people of Lane County in this capacity, and I look forward to whatever the future holds. So thank you for that. I've always enjoyed consistent and strong support from the board, and the Parks Division has been a benefit of that. I just want to encourage that continue as the transition to new leadership occurs, that you consider the positive trajectory that the Parks Division, Parks and Animal Services is on, that you continue to support that direction. Thank you. So this morning, I'm happy to bring to you a celebration of partnership focused on the Howard Buford Recreation Area. I have representatives today with me: Chris Orsinger, the Executive Director of Friends of Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, the Executive Director, Brad Ben Apple, the Executive Director of the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, and what's your rank now, Alan?
Past captain.
Past captain of the Sheriff's Mounted Posse, Alan Murphy, who's been a constant in our interactions with the Sheriff's Mounted Posse, whether he was the captain or not. He's always taken an active role to represent the posse to the Parks Division. So thank you for being here, Alan. Wanted to highlight for you and just provide to you an overview of the individual contributions of these organizations to the effective stewardship and management of the Howard Buford Recreation Area, providing value-added services that would not be provided otherwise. Lane County just does not have the resources that these folks bring to the property. As you know, Howard Buford Recreation Area is our largest park in the park system. Of the 4,400 acres, 2,200 is this park. And as you can see, the yellow outlined areas are each stakes that each organization hold in the park. Arboretum lease area. We currently have a 50-year lease with the Arboretum that expires in 2046 for that 209 acres within the park. They have exclusive management of that area in the park, as you know, and as Brad will get into, have made specific improvements and increased visitation to the park through their programming, and then now working towards making destination points within the park with their interpretive plan implementation. Friends of Buford Park have a native plant nursery in the North Bottomlands that they've established there and have been running for many years. Again, Chris will go into more detail about that. But they kind of help us steward the rest of the park area outside of that 209 acres. And then the Posse Horse Arena up in the North Bottomlands as well is kind of a central point for equestrian use in the park. And the as Alan will go into detail about their services, providing patrols in the park, a friendly customer service face on a horse, and people enjoy that interaction with the posse and knowing that there is somebody on the trails in the park looking out for their safety. So with that, we're going to hear from the Mount Pisgah Arboretum first, Friends of Buford Park, and then the Sheriff's Mounted Posse. As you can see, these are very long-term relationships, decades-long relationships with each of these organizations related to the park. Even before it was a county park, county did have some management responsibility of the park when it was owned by the state. And those relationships were even established before it was even a Lane County park. So long-term, very valuable relationships, and we just want to get you up to date on where each organization is and what we're looking towards in the future. So with that, I'll start the Arboretum presentation. And Brad Van Apple.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for commissioners for inviting us here today to celebrate some very successful community partnerships. As Mike mentioned, I'm Brad Van Apple, the Executive Director of Mount Pisgah Arboretum. The Arboretum is a nonprofit community organization with a mission to engage people with nature through interactive learning and stewardship.
Hi, I'm Bixby. It's great to meet you.
Our work is made possible through a public-private partnership with Lane County. As Mike mentioned, we lease a beautiful 209-acre natural area in the heart of HBRA, Howard Buford Recreation Area. We actively partner with the Parks Department, with the Friends of Buford Park, and with the Sheriff's Posse to care for the park and to provide services and facilities for the visitors. These partnerships offer an incredible value to the citizens of Lane County. The Arboretum receives the largest portion of its funding from individual donors, including our 1,700 members and 500 active volunteers. Since we were founded in 1973, the Arboretum has invested millions of dollars in funds that we've raised from the private sector, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of volunteer hours to restore and care for habitats, construct and maintain trails, and provide nature education for children and adults on our region's unique ecology. The Arboretum is blessed to have this site. It's a very ecologically diverse site, including wetlands and riparian areas. This shot was taken in our water garden area. And western pond turtles like this one are known to live up to 70 years. But unfortunately, right now, they're listed within the state of Oregon as critically threatened. Go ahead, Mike. We also have a variety of both deciduous and coniferous forests. This is a picture of a pileated woodpecker taken along our incense cedar trail. Pileatids are the largest woodpecker you're going to see in North America, and they've been known to actually peck through small trees and chop them down. So it's a pretty large bird. And of course, we have our beautiful savannas and prairies. Many of you probably know that oak savannas and prairies used to dominate the landscape in the Willamette Valley prior to European settlement. In the last 150 or so years, we're now down to about 2% of the oak savannas that were here prior to Western European settlement. And some of the best examples of oak savannas that you can find in public ownership are in Howard Buford Recreation Area. So it's quite a resource. Together, these various habitats offer a compelling representation of southern Willamette Valley ecology. The 7 miles of family-friendly trails that we maintain within the Arboretum lease area invite people of all ages to explore and provide access to peace and beauty of the natural world. And the ability of the Arboretum and the other partners to engage volunteers and to leverage private donations has made it possible to restore and care for natural ecosystems and to construct and maintain trails at a level that is far exceeds what the county could do with its own resources alone. This is a Youth Day of Caring work party at the Arboretum recently. In the course of our nearly 45-year partnership, the Arboretum has raised and invested over $1 million in private funds specifically to build public infrastructure within the park. And we plan to invest another $500,000 in the next few years in public facilities. In the 1980s, in the early 80s, we raised the funds and built the main parking lot in the park in HBRA. We've been working since then with the county to maintain the parking lot, and in 2016 we partnered with the county and the Friends and the Posse to make improvements on the lot and to add beautiful new directional signs for visitors. In 2009, the four partners got together and formed the Park Watch program to watch over the park. And that's been a very successful program. Here's one of our star Park Watch volunteers, Wayne, posing out in the main lot there. The Arboretum also funded, built, and maintains the park's potable water system and its primary restrooms. And 12 years ago, we opened the White Oak Pavilion, which now provides funding to support educational programs in the park by serving as a venue for weddings, memorial services, and other community events. More recently, we've been developing permanent educational exhibits that are meant to be interactive and engaging so that more visitors will actually learn about nature while they're visiting the park. On the left here, you see some children exploring our wetlands exhibit, which was installed in 2016. And on the right, our brand new incense cedar exhibit along our incense cedar trail, which we finished this past summer. And that one is sponsored by Mountain Rose Herbs. On a day-to-day basis, the partner organizations serve as the eyes and ears for Lane County and also as the ambassadors at HBRA. The Arboretum has an on-site office that's open 5 days a week, and it serves as an information center where friendly Arboretum staff greet visitors, provide maps, directions, and recreational suggestions, and take reports of problems within the park. The Arboretum office staff also raises funds for the county by selling parking passes, both annual and daily passes. The field staff and volunteers for all of the organization are out there on the site on a daily basis taking care of habitats and trails and responding to the needs of visitors. And this often includes dealing with the unexpected. The Arboretum site manager, pictured here, Tom Lacasio, has been living on site as the county's caretaker for the site for over 36 years. So his extensive knowledge of the park and his regular on-site presence enables a rapid response to anything from a lost hiker to a major storm. After last winter's big ice storm, the partners pooled their resources and went out to clear trails and hazards so that we could reopen the park to the public as quickly as possible at a time when county resources were stretched very thin. So the Arboretum sent out crews in one direction and the Friends of Beaufort Park sent out crews in the other direction so that we could cover all 29 miles of trails, and the Sheriff's Posse came up afterwards on their horses to make sure that all the trails were equestrian ready and ready for the public to return. At the Arboretum, our main focus is education. And that's because we believe that the more people learn about and engage with the natural world, the more they will honor and preserve it for future generations. The Arboretum's mission is to engage people with the natural world, and we've become a regional leader in educating people about the region's ecology. We approach education from a lot of different angles. And each year, about 3,000 school children participate in our Discovery Tours program, which are volunteer-led field trips from all the region's schools. So this is one of those trips. These days, we've been doing this so long that many of the children who come out now have parents who also discovered nature on our field trips when they were kids. Of course, nature education isn't just for kids. We also provide programs most weekends throughout the years, guided nature walks and natural history workshops for adults and families. And we partner with the University of Oregon, Lane Community College, and other organizations in the community to provide opportunities for specialized education and research within the Arboretum all year long. In the long run, the Arboretum's work to build a community that is more engaged and educated about nature may be our most important contribution to Lane County. The Arboretum, the Friends, and the Posse all rely heavily on volunteers. The value of volunteer hours contributed at the Arboretum alone last year was estimated at more than $125,000. It might be easy to think of all these volunteers as just one more asset that the partners bring to the table, and that's true. But community involvement is not just a means to an end, it's also a crucial result in its own right. Parks only exist because citizens see value in them. If people stop caring, the parks might go away. By working with community partners, Lane County is ensuring a healthy future for the community and for its citizens, and the Arboretum is very proud to be part of this. And before I turn over the microphone, I also want to give a quick nod to Mike. We've been working with him for nearly 6 years now, I guess, in his capacity as Parks Manager. And during that time, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. We've dealt with some serious sticky issues like whether we should have large events in the park. And through it all, Mike has kept a steady hand and ultimately been shown a real commitment to public process. And his leadership has helped us strengthen these partnerships and strengthen the bond between the community and the county. So I want to thank him for his service. It's been great working with him. Thank you, Mike.
So my name is Chris Orsinger, Executive Director for Friends of Buford Park, and I thank you for this opportunity to bring a little of the great outdoors inside to you. I really enjoy working with Lane County Parks and with the Arboretum and the Posse. It's a honor and a pleasure, and it's something that inspires a lot of people, that mountain, those rivers that embrace it, the Coast Fork and the Middle Fork. And it's part of what gives meaning to us. Our mission is to protect and enhance native ecosystems and compatible recreation in the Mount Pisgah area. And we have four main program areas where we try to realize that mission through. One is to protect land in perpetuity through acquisitions or conservation easements. And since our founding in 1989, we've helped advocate for or acquire or support others acquiring, like public agencies in the Nature Conservancy, 1,750 acres. The second program area is to nurture the native habitats that you saw so beautifully rendered in the photographs that Brad shared. There are rare habitats, many diverse habitats on Mount Pisgah, and we've worked to restore over 700 acres outside the Arboretum on Buford Park and outside Buford Park on adjacent lands. We have worked hard and to ramp up our efforts to improve the trails. There's 9 miles within the Arboretum and 26 miles outside of Arboretum. And that trail system is the key asset for people to engage with nature on their own and improve their health, whether as hiking or as equestrians. And then undergirding all of those programs, we're always trying to involve volunteers and donors. In other words, we're trying to cultivate a culture of stewardship so that through the volunteer service and through philanthropy. So we have over 600 volunteers last year and over 800 donors. Left button. We formed in 1989 because outside the Arboretum at that time, all the rest of the Buford Park, the 2,000 other acres, there was no community organization helping the county, and the county's was limited in its resources with, you know, another 70 park and recreation sites to take care of. We also formed because we wanted to realize the original vision for the park by acquiring this 1,300 acres from the Wildish family, with its 6 miles along the Middle Fork and a mile along the Coast Fork. That was the original vision for the park, is to have all these lands between the two rivers available for recreation and habitat. You can see how the lands in yellow connect the Buford Park to the parklands on the north bank of the river, which benefit, you know, on the Springfield side of the river. Notably, too, the Springfield's drinking water comes from these well fields owned by Springfield Utility Board. At least I think it's about 40% of the drinking water. So the quality of that water is dependent on, in part, on the care of the habitat upstream of that area. This mosaic of ownerships is part of the challenge that we faced when we formed, is that different entities had different pieces of land, yet we needed to coordinate our management, and that's what's been advancing in the 27 years since our founding. Since our founding, some of the land ownerships we advocated for was the Georgia Pacific parcel that connected Clearwater Park to Doris Ranch. That now allows for the more recent bike path that has been built by Willamette Lane along that area. In addition, the acquisition in 1998 of this half-mile river frontage, now owned by BPA, we've been involved in its restoration. We're going to talk more later in the presentation about what's been happening on the Willamette Confluence Preserve and on the Turtle Flats property, which was acquired in 2015. So 2010, the big acquisition was finally acquired. Took only 20 years. And Turtle Flats with Lane County's partnership in both of those, connecting to state parklands shown in brown. But altogether, before you can do anything for recreation and habitat, you have to protect land, and by buying parkland or buying easement. And this is an important regional asset, this larger landscape that is here at Mount Pisgah. With regard to our habitat program, one of the recent activities that we've been working with Lane County closely is the development of a habitat management plan to provide a 15-year blueprint for how to focus our restoration efforts, how to sequence them, and how to save those rare habitats like the oak savanna and the important riparian lands. This will help us secure grant funding as well, because we can convey to the funders, this is the plan, and we've thought hard and deep about it. That plan is trying not only to conserve the habitats, but conserve this visitor experience of the great beauty. And here is a hiker walking through an area of oak savanna that had been restored in 2008, our first savanna restoration project, where trees were removed to maintain the health of the oaks. Here's an example of a savanna restoration project where the blackberries had covered about 80% of the prairie. And working in partnership with the grant funds we secured, we hired Lane County Public Works employees to mow that 50 acres of steep ground. It was a challenging, rocky site, and that's what it looked like the next month. Subsequently, as we continued to enhance that prairie, one of the key maintenance activities is a periodic prescribed burn. So this whole blackened area was a partnership with the Nature Conservancy working on savanna restoration on their side of the property line and Lane County's. And as a result, we've achieved the condition we have now, which is a beautiful restored grassland with the oaks scattered. Those oaks are like a grocery store for the wildlife. All those acorns are just a major food source. And that's one of the reasons why they're very important for acorn woodpeckers and other species who use them. The other thing that's important about our work, and we're going to try to transition and back and forth between, is this compatible recreation thing. So at the same time that we developed this project, we improved this trail system so people could watch the restoration in process and also have better vistas of beautiful wildflowers and vistas of the valley below. Speaking more a little bit about the trail improvement work outside of the Arboretum, our most recent projects, this just completed last month, working again with Lane County Lane County Public Works, is the Trail 5 project, almost a mile of improved trail through a muddy, mucky area that would have stolen your boots in the deep of winter. And coming up this winter and spring, we'll be improving this section so that this whole reach of Trail 4 that's outlined all the way there will have been improved over the last 4 years. Basically, everything in outlined trails have been improved since 2010. So that's a total of 9 miles of trails, and it's one of our key volunteers, Bill Montgomery. A shout out to him, who works really hard with our Lane County Natural Areas Coordinator at Alverson. And this is the kind of conditions we often would see in the winter on some of these trails that hadn't been managed for many years or might have evolved initially as cow paths. This was an old logging road that we improved to this condition now. And that gives a great recreational experience. So moving back to the two other properties, the Willamette Confluence Preserve being now owned by the Nature Conservancy, and the Turtle Flats property that Lane County transferred, that we purchased using Bonneville Power Administration funding down here. The Turtle Flats is in this area, and then, of course, all of this is the Nature Conservancy's ownership. There's been basically 5 floodplain or river restoration projects over the years: the Sorensen parcel off the map, the South Meadow on Buford Park, and these areas. And then it's really picked up with the this upper project being done in 2014, the excavation on this site in 2016, and just last summer, this site, the middle area. And if you might remember, Turtle Flats had been a Lane County Waste Management property and was leased in the 80s and 90s to bring recycling. And there was a certain problem with having a floodplain site for this kind of facility. On occasion, the river returns to claim ownership. But for a wildlife and wetland and salmon restoration project, it was amazing. We have a altered view, I guess, of this map. I'm sorry, I don't know why this is, but the Turtle Flats property is here, and each of these yellow areas are basically channel segments that we constructed through an old road that had been built. The old road was like a big dike, so the fish couldn't jump over the road. They hadn't evolved that capacity yet. So we did a number of there was a lot of work to do, and so this is my little overview of what was involved. First, the site preparation was extensive to just clean out the blackberries and the asphalt and the concrete and the debris that had been left on this site. It had been used for demolition of road demolition disposal sites. So there was a lot of rebar and concrete and asphalt, and even in the ponds we found one of these old cars.
That's where my roommate Z-Dub went. All right.
That's where it went. You remember that one. This is an area that had been cleared of blackberries. This is a grappler that we used to actually pull the blackberry root balls out of the ground. We pulled out over 500 tires off the site. This may look like blackberry brambles, but that's all the rebar, and these are steel concrete culverts that we hauled off for recycling. And then volunteers would come in and further clear blackberry root balls out of these disturbed sites or from the native vegetation. one of the project goals was to increase the emergent habitat. So these steep banks that are like bathtub steep, were graded, and this site is before and this is after, and this is where we have planted emergent vegetation, grasses, sedges, cattails, that actually provide habitat for the young salmon to hide in, or for frogs to lay their eggs on, or baby turtles to get cover from things that want to eat them. So this is all a very deeply thought out project, working closely with the Nature Conservancy in this case, because the project actually involved doing work on 3 ownerships: the Glass Bar Islands State Park, the Turtle Flats, and this is a corner of the TNC property. And these are just showing how those channel segments created fish passage during high water all the way back into these backwater areas. And that's a major important thing for downstream migrating salmon. They need these refugia areas to get out of the turbulent flows of the floods in the winter. They find refuge there, also find rearing habitat, which helps them grow stronger. They find a lot of bugs to eat, basically, and grow stronger for their trip downstream. Here's a picture post-project of 2 of the channels connected. There's the old haul road that carried the gravel down to Glenwood, to the former, where it was processed. This is the Coast Fork, and the confluence is just off the site. And this particular channel is here's a ground view of that channel. So we maintained our maintenance access during drier seasons, and we have about 9 months of connectivity between the river and these ponded areas now. Over 60 acres were disturbed or graded, or, topsoil moved around to improve the planting habitats, and we developed 5 different habitat types that were being planted in a mosaic here to increase the diversity. Of course, each of these habitats has different fish or wildlife or birds that need them. So it's really amazing transformation. Do you know if the... So we're going to look at a video of the most recent work that the Nature Conservancy did. Friends of Beaufort Park's main role in the 3rd phase of the project that was done has primarily been vegetation management and helping with public tours, and also provision of seed from our native plant nursery. But you can see these old gravel ponds formed artificially by extraction. And the river used to flow in the 1930s along here. And this berm was constructed to help contain the sediment from the gravel operation and keep it in the pond. But in the process, it prevented any fish from moving into these areas that used to be available. So the restoration work included the removal of the downstream half mile of this mile-long revetment and punching a hole through this part so that the fish can move from the river into these areas, and then all the way up during high water events into this slough, which comes all the way to our nursery and to the North Bottomlands. That would be in very large events, not all that frequent. We're going to show you a little video. We hope, let's see if that'll come up. Oop, I need technical support here from Mike. Just you get it going. So we're looking here, and can you pause that right now, Mike? All right, well, here's the... We'll try that again. Yeah, it's back. You're going forward. You're going forward. Anyway, the removal of the revetment is an incredibly important and difficult undertaking that required a great deal of permitting and planning and hydraulic analysis. But what you'll see is that this river that was here now can interact with that pond. And just let it run. Don't try to stop it. There it is. Yeah. And this is the connection back to the other pond. And behind these trees is a connection to the Thompson Slough, where the fish during very high events can access these areas. These are very food-rich areas for salmon. This whole area has been cleared of invasive blackberry and weeds and is prepared for planting. So none of these areas have been planted as of this photograph. But all these areas around the ponds have been cleared of blackberries, and Scottsbroom are ready for planting. There's going to be over 190 acres of planting in this phase. The estimated 500,000 trees and shrubs. And then this is the new gravel bed that's here. This is the Coast Fork, and this is the Middle Fork, and this is the peninsula between, and Turtle Flats is way down here. So anyway, it gives you an idea of some of the work ahead. So we've talked about the land protection program, the trail program, and the habitat restoration program. Talking about the cultivating a culture of stewardship through volunteer service and philanthropy. This is the growth in our volunteer corps and involvement, over 600 volunteers in the last year. You can see the distribution of that across our program areas. A great number of people participate in our habitat, in our nursery program, which is a great anchor, a way they connect to the park and to the whole idea of we have to take part in nurturing this nature that we enjoy, that provides us clean water, and here is a tangible way to do it, part of a coordinated program that makes sense, and they can see the impacts. Every year they go after a planting project or after a trail project. You see about a quarter of our volunteer time was devoted to trail improvements, and quite a bit for our managing the organization as well. And then in terms of our income, it looks like we've got some issues with our naming things here, but there was $1 million in revenue for our organization last year. About a third, the pink and the red, is 33%. Those are donor-advised grants, which are local community people and local people. And then you can see how this is the government and foundation grants. And the white section is contracts for services to basically control weeds or do other things for other agencies. So in short, we're trying to sustain this level of capacity. This is growth for us. 3 years ago, we were at $600,000. So I guess to wrap up, here's a view of Mount Pisgah at the confluence. Here's the Coast Fork coming in, the Middle Fork. Turtle Flats is over here. Glass Bar Island is over here too. Doris Ranch is here. It's an incredible resource for the future, and this has been a multi-generational effort since the 70s, when the likes of Airman Justina and Alton Baker and Maury Jacobs went up and lobbied Tom McCall and said, we want this park. And they got a yes. And that led to the acquisition of Buford Park because county people wanted it. And one of them was Paul Beistel, one of your parks manager at the time, who was kind of the midwife to the acquisition at that time. But every generation has to take care of this place, and I think that's one of the things to understand that we have as an asset is we have a deep, deep, strong, broad community interest in this place, whether it's people volunteering through the Arboretum or the Friends or through the Posse. People love this place. Not everybody uses it, but those who use it are connected to it. So we want to nurture this. We want to nurture this community of support through your efforts and our efforts, and we appreciate the partnership. And I think we've gotten a lot accomplished through our partnership over these decades.
Thank you, Chris.
I, too, want to close with some recognition of Mike for his 6 years of service as a parks manager. He has been an incredible partner, very supportive of our efforts and supportive of helping us all as entities work better together. And that has been very evident. And thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Chris.
If you click there, you can advance the slides.
Really?
I can drive.
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay.
I hadn't planned on it. Am I on? Is this on? Yeah. I'm Alan Murphy with Lane County Sheriff's Mounted Posse, and I appreciate Chris's segue into historical matters, because that's where I'd like to start. With the Posse has a little different approach to things, and it's more of a historical approach. I'll start with myself. My great uncle Cornelius Gillum brought a group here in 1844 to the Willamette Valley, so I've got pretty deep roots here. And he also led a group that blazed a trail from Dallas, Oregon down to this area so that Eugene Skinner could find his way down here. So I've got a lot of history myself, and I'm interested in Oregon history. I started riding horses when I was about 8 years old on an uncle's ranch. And I started riding my horse in the Howard Buford Recreation Area in the mid to early 70s when it first became open to the public. And I don't know then if it was a state land or if the county had it yet. But anyway, I've been out there for a long time. And then I joined the Lane County Sheriff's Mounted Posse in 2005 after almost 40 years on the railroad and get settled in on retirement. Why I found time to get into the Sheriff's Posse. The posse was organized in 1941 by a group of volunteers, and that was before volunteerism was much of an item. It's a pretty big item today, as we've just heard, a huge item. But the posse started in 1941 to assist the sheriff and during the manpower shortage of World War II, but also to promote the use of Western horses and try to maintain the traditions of early Oregon and also to uphold civil order. Today we average about 20 active members, and those 20 active members gave 3,080 volunteer hours last year. And that doesn't count the days hauling hay and using that shovel out in the barn. This is just the things we sign up for when we hit the road to go do something. This relationship between the members of the Lane County Mounted Posse and the citizens of Lane County has been continuous for 76 years at no expense to the citizenry because we all provide our own horse and transportation. And that's a requirement. So everything you see there, except the sheriff out in front, is we pay for out of our own pocket and cover all of our own expenses. And it's a requirement when you join the posse that you own a horse and that you have a way of transporting your horse. We've participated or managed parking lots at the Eugene Pro Rodeo, Cottage Grove Rodeo, and you may have seen us at the Lane County Fair, which 2 years ago turned into a major fundraising venture. We took over total management of the fair parking when it became a fee plan, and we share that revenue with the Fair Board. And although we appear in parades and various other civic settings, our main mission under the Sheriff's Office is to be part of his search and rescue operation. And we receive our standard SAR training. Anybody that wants to be involved in Lane County Search and Rescue Program has to go through the SAR 101, which is 2 to 3 months of pretty rigorous training every winter. And this is a picture of 4 of us up above Rosary Lakes. We're just on we do our own training also. And the horses were behind the camera. We stopped here. It's a nice viewpoint. Looks back to the south over all 3 Rosary Lakes, and just out of the picture is Odell Lake and Crescent Lake. So we go out. This was an overnighter. We were up there all night and then spent the day out on the trail learning how to use our skills and sharpening our skills with the GPS and compass and reminding ourselves what all we need to do to take care of ourselves and our horses. And one example I'd like to tell you about, we had a call out 2 years ago from Deschutes County to help them with a search and rescue. There was a lost elk hunter up there, and so they wanted us to come up and help look for him, and 8 of us arrived up there at Elk Lake about daylight the next morning. And after we got there, just as we were getting briefed on which trails to ride, we found out that he'd been found. He'd walked into someone's camp. So our search mission turned into a rescue mission. He was up on the Pacific Crest Trail, He'd walked into someone's camp after 2 nights out there in Three Sisters Wilderness with no tent. He'd gone in with a group to elk hunt, and they'd packed in with mules, and he decided he'd just go out for a little evening scout. Well, he turned out to be a 2-night ordeal. And when they were briefing us, they told us a little bit about him. He said he was 72 years old, a double lung transplant patient with no medication, and they were pretty concerned about him. Well, by the time we got in there we took 3 riders and 4 horses, and we went in there. It took us about 2.5 hours to get into where he was. We loaded him up on a horse and took him back down to this meadow where Life Flight came out of Bend. Now, you don't usually see that in the wilderness area, but his situation was so critical that they said if he's not under a doctor's care in the next couple of hours, that he's not going to make it. Well, it was 2.5 hours for us to ride out horseback, and then he would have had to take an ambulance ride to Bend. So Life Flight came out of Bend and picked him up, and there's, as they were loading him, one of our members is back there helping get him on the stretcher with the chopper crew. And I don't know who the guy is photobombing that picture. But anyway, it was about a 2-hour ride for us back out to our horse trailers, and about 30 minutes later, he was over here at River Bend talking to his own doctor and getting treatment, and did well, came out of it in real good shape. This is the kind of a thing that really motivates posse members to keep up their training and to keep working on their horses and working on their own skills. And a lot of times we get a call and we're out there, we go out in the woods and look for somebody, and most of the time we don't find anybody. Something happens. They walk out or something. So this is the kind of a case. We get one of these calls every year or two. We'll get a call where somebody can't get out of the wilderness area, and we can get in there and get them out where there's some help. And that's where our training with our horses really comes in handy. Now, this is a picture out at the arena. I wish I'd have had a couple of Chris's pictures. I saw the arena in some of his aerial photography, but you may not have noticed. But this is the kind of things we do. We got a drill that we run through. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a horse drill competition, but it involves a lot of maneuvers where the riders and the horses make crossover moves and passing moves. This is a spin. Half of us are going one way and the other half's going the other way, spinning around in the center. But this is the kind of training that we do all the time. So when we get a call, we're used to riding that horse, and we know what that horse will do, and we got horses that are going to be doing what we want them to do. In 1986, there was an arena built down on the bank of the Coast Fork, and in 2001, it was moved to get away from the river, and this is further north and east of there. But the posse built this arena, improved the level footing, built the fencing, put in lighting, water, and an announcer stand. And there's a renewable agreement between the posse and Lane County, which allows the posse to manage and maintain the arena and the nearby area. This year we had 101 volunteer hours plus $3,800 in expenses to maintain the arena footing and grass around the area. Some of those hours were also volunteers that showed up with their own tractor, hauled their tractors in and mowed grass and rototilled and did whatever was needed in the arena.
Captain Murphy, if I may apologize,
Sure.
We have about an hour-long session before our lunch break today, and I would love to hear more and more and more, but I do believe board members have some questions, perhaps for all three of the members of the panel. But please continue.
Oh, well, I think I'm getting close to done, but I just wanted to say that we do use that arena, and it's a good asset for us, and we hope that we can be an asset to the county. We have these mounted patrols Mike referred to. This is our sheriff up on top of the mountain.
and he has put out a general order on how we conduct these patrols. We're required to be in uniform and carry a first aid kit on the horse, and a lot of us, myself included, will carry extra water and snacks in case we run across somebody that needs something in that area, and also carry maps that I like to hand out to whoever will take one that shows where the trails are and has park rules and etiquette, and just to try to educate people. There was a time when there was an Adopt a Trail program, and the posse was always one of the trail adopters and did some of the work out there, but that was quite a few years ago, and that was before the Friends got so involved in the trails, and they really they do a terrific job out there. And we get called out once in a while after a storm to do a trail survey or something, but it's kind of interesting to be out there on the trails and have people realize that their sheriff just rode up on a horse. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The actual real sheriff.
Yeah, the real deal. So I'll close just by saying that it's been a pleasure for me to work with Chris and Brad and Mike in the county stakeholders group that's been very active on a quarterly basis since Mike has been in the position he's in. And I also would just like to say that it's really been a pleasure to work with Mike, and he's been a real problem solver and a real peacemaker, and stepped into some bees' nests that it looked like they were going to be a big problem, and well, sometimes they were, but it worked out. So I just want to say thank you, Mike. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Captain Murphy. I have a quick question for you. You know, I take my family and friends to the fair, and everybody's more impressed than anything else is you guys riding your horses. Where do you find such big, tall horses? My word.
We have a limit. 17 hands is the biggest your horse can be.
That's the biggest.
That's what mine is. So, yeah, I know what you mean. But we have limits because we want to have some uniformity. We don't want ponies and draft horses.
It is impressive to anyone who sees it. Thank you.
Similar.
Then we'll open this for questions from the board. And first, real quickly, I'm not going to dig into this too deeply, but your native plant nursery is so impressive. You know, native plants are expensive to find, expensive to get, and the more that we can get introduced into our local, into landscapes, private landscapes, and also into our public landscapes, the better off we are. And it's pretty impressive what you guys do. The quality of the plants is amazing. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 17 hands. Now that's a big horse.
It's a big step for an old guy.
Yeah, well, it's a big step for any guy. So, gal, I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I did some cowboying down in Douglas County, so I know that is a big horse. So, by the way, and I'm kind of serious, but not really. Is there a requirement that about every other horse and the majority of the horses have to be paints? Because I'm looking at that picture, and almost all of them are.
Well, those are my two Appaloosas there.
That's an Appaloosa, and then I saw on that other picture of the row, a bunch of paints. And
there was a time when you couldn't join the posse if you didn't own a bay horse with white plates.
Anyway, it's beautiful. But I just want to say thank you very much to all of you for the presentations, and really greatly appreciate it. It's pretty amazing to see what we have right in the middle of this urban core, this incredible park, and that we have going on. And I think it's a great example, I think, to so many other communities around the state of Oregon. Thank you very much. And Mike, I just also want to just say thank you very, very much. 2012, that was during our financial insecurity, trying to figure out what we're going to do, and you were a live body, and they kind of threw you in there, and I remembered all of that because this was not what you were necessarily trained for, but I must say, over the years, you have really grown into this position, and I want to say thank you very, very much for all your work, and really to, I think, make Lane County Parks, whomever takes that position next, they've got an ideal situation, and that's because of you and your leadership and the work you've done with our staff. Thanks, Mike, for all your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Lyken. Just to put that in perspective, I believe that I'm about 17 hands with no shoes on. So. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you. So I just want to thank all the partners here. You know, the Howard Buford Park, Mount Pisgah, and the surrounding properties are truly a gem in Lane County, and all of you have a piece of that. And it was great to hear all the various parts and how you all interact. And I'll real quick, before I forget, I'll just say thank you, Mike, for your service to the citizens of Lane County, and wish you the best in the future. I want to kind of get completely outside the box here, and as all of you are working in partnership and talking about Mount Pisgah and Howard Buford Park and the various things, remember that it is a central piece to an entire recreation system in Lane County. And don't forget that sometimes if we get a little bit myopic on that, it can actually form a roadblock to other recreation systems. And in particularly, I'm concerned about bike pedestrian connectivity. We've got a wonderful bike path that's running down one side of the river that would be great to bridge and connect with other bike ped facilities. And unfortunately, some of the way the rules are written, it's going to be really difficult to do that. But I think as you guys look collaboratively, it'd be great to connect that bike path system that's on the Springfield side, somehow or another on the west end of the park, get it connected to CV Loop, which is a major cycling road, and on the east end, get it out to Ridgeway and ultimately to Wheeler and those roads, which are huge cycling areas. Because right now, there's some real roadblocks to cycling in the Pleasant Hill area. You got to get past I-5 and Franklin Boulevard and all that, which is a zoo if you're a cyclist. And then you got to get past that bridge on Highway 58 because there's no way to get around it. You can kind of get down to it on Matthews and get back off fairly quickly. But that's a scary piece of roadway to ride as a cyclist, is Highway 58. You guys offer that opportunity maybe to make those connections and ultimately be able to ride a bike from downtown Springfield out to the Arboretum for the Mushroom Festival would really be nice without having to go through Glenwood and Franklin Boulevard to get there. So just keep that in mind, how that park fits into the overall county system and how you guys can be a part of that connectivity.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozevich. Commissioner Williams and Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Variety of things, I'll keep them short, but first of all, Captain, I'd like to spend some time with you in the future, talk about ancestral background on early pioneers and trailblazers, because I think we have a link there. In regards to Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, special place in my heart. My mother, 92 years old, was born by Trail 5, right at the crook of where the Coast Fork goes up against the base of Pisgah and then heads west. But right in that general area, my mother was born in 1925. And she lived there a number of years, her early years. Apocryphally speaking, in those days during the Great Depression, it was not uncommon to spend an entire day, which was a 16-hour day, to make very little money. And my mother's oldest brother, who's long departed, worked all day harvesting turkeys, got paid a dime, and as they were in a very remote place, they could not get to a bank, so he buried the dime on Mount Pisgah. He was probably the very first geocache guys out there. That dime is still out there, so, you know, good luck.
No, it's not.
But really, Mount Pisgah, I had the opportunity to go out there over the summer on 2 occasions, one with Mike and visited with Brad. And as a result of that, Kevin Shaney invited me out, and we did a pretty comprehensive survey of all that's going on in the park, Turtle Flats, and absolutely amazing work that's going on out there. And I look at Mount Pisgah and Buford Park as just like, if not the crown jewel, certainly one of the crown jewels of Lane County. It's absolutely a treasure for for everybody and for generations to come. So I congratulate you all on the work that you do, and wish you continued success in that endeavor. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. I think this partnership that we see right here in front of us with the Friends and the Sheriff's Mounted Posse and the Arboretum, just a wonderful collaboration. I just want to encourage you to keep that up. I'm going to make a suggestion that we have a board workshop on the future of the lease about 10 years from now to keep it moving as to what we're going to do.
Only if you're here.
I'll probably be here, so and I remember Mr. Gillum myself, by the way, a few years back. But I think that the partnership is something to be celebrated, and all the service that you've already provided. All three organizations have already provided over the last roughly 30 years, and in some cases, many more years. The one thing I wanted to ask about from each of you, and just quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, for you, Chris, what do you see as the relationship between the Friends and the county regarding the native plant nursery? A comparable lease to what the Arboretum has, or continuation of the same agreement? That nursery is, in my view, got value way beyond the park itself. Could you just give us your take on that?
Well, the nursery is a hub for our operations there. It's currently a project approval, 5-year approval, not a lease. It's just evolved that way. It may be that a lease, a more durable arrangement, is something we've discussed with the Parks Division, and possibly including a larger footprint to facilitate fundraising for improvement of the old CV barn and CV house, which are historic assets that will help us appreciate and interpret our pioneer history there, and also to complement that with interpreting the Native American history that predates, of course, our Euro-American settlement. So I think that's something that we can look at that would be more durable. When I think about the North Bottomlands and its position relative to the Willamette Confluence Preserve, the Nature Conservancy ownerships, and the intention of the Nature Conservancy to transfer that property to another entity to care for it in the next decade, I think it's a natural gateway area of the park. So it is the place in the master plan, the county master plan for Buford Park, where the greatest future development is envisioned. It's not intensive development, but some greater capacity and welcoming for people to then perhaps take hikes into that area is what I hope to see in the future. Okay. And another, at least maybe a way to go.
Okay. And Brad, I know that the Arboretum started out as an Arboretum. I know that there was a lot of interest on the part of the University of Oregon to create a place in the state of Oregon where different trees could be exhibited, and I'm curious, I know that the organization's gone through some change in that respect. I just want to get your perspective on the use of that leasehold and that land for Arboretum purposes, and whether that's really going to be, in the future for the work of the Arboretum.
Okay. Well, I would say that these days there's a lot of different kinds of arboretums out there, and there are a number across the country of native arboretums, and we've recognized an opportunity to really more intensively educate people about the trees and ecology of this region. So we are probably not going to be heading toward that traditional concept of an arboretum with trees planted from around the world, but rather doing something that's special and unique to this area. And
so the word arboretum will still apply because it'll be the native oaks or the other kinds of trees that are native to this area, and that in that respect it will be continued as an arboretum.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we intend to continue to expand our educational programs. As I said, we hope to have 8 permanent exhibits out there, one for each one of our different habitat areas. So in the course of an afternoon, you can visit the Arboretum and walk around all these exhibits and really get an understanding of Southern Willamette Valley ecology and what it's like and what trees grow here and how it all works. And then after that, we'll probably be looking at a new visitor center. And our lease, our long-term lease, really is part of what makes all that possible, to raise funds for facilities. Donors, if you can't say you're going to be there for a while, they're probably not going to give you the money to build a visitor center or a new exhibit. So you got to be able to demonstrate you have a long-term relationship and you're going to continue and follow through on it. So
that's why extending that lease, and like I said, I think a work session on that, it's not too soon to plan that because that date is approaching.
I agree.
Yeah. And finally, with regard to the sheriff's posse, you know, all the counties along the Oregon coast and all the counties in the valley and all the counties that have big mountainous areas, and we're in the middle of all that, they also have lots of search and rescue issues. We hear about this all the time. People aren't prepared. They go off the trail, or they're not prepared and they're on the trail, but now there's a snowfall or some kind of wind event. They're just not prepared. And I'm just curious, in your work with sheriff's posses, whether other counties are doing more. It seems odd to me, you know, that we got 360,000 people in Lane County, and not all of them are getting lost every weekend. But if we've got 20 people that have horses that are volunteers and willing to go out and try to help in the search and rescue effort, that seems small to me. And what about Marion County? What about Douglas County? What about Clackamas County, who share a big chunk of this Pacific Crest Trail and a big chunk of big forested land? What are they doing, and do they provide funding to help you guys do this work? What can be done to expand your work?
Well, I think primarily the counties you mentioned, the coast or the Cascade Range counties, do have posses that function pretty much like Lane County's posse.
Same size?
Pretty much, yeah. But we aren't all of the search and rescue. And in fact, the largest number of search and rescue volunteers in Lane County are people that are on foot and get taken out to a search location in a van. And even though they're volunteers also, they're the first line of call. So there are a lot more people involved than just the 20 posse members.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Any further questions? Then a great presentation. I could look at the photos all day long. But really, better than the photos is go out there. What you've done out there is just really amazing. When I began looking many years ago, you know, it's hard to imagine that could be reclaimed, let alone the work that you have done to actually reclaim that area. And to see an area, a confluence so close to a major metropolitan area be reclaimed the way it has, reclaimed forever. You know, you place this into generational perpetuity. You know, that will be there for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. So thank you. It really is a most amazing place. And if you're watching this on TV right now and you've never been out there, take some time, because the 9 miles of trails just barely scratch the surface of how wonderful this area is. So thank you very much. And Captain Murphy, thanks for being here. Thanks for being at the fairground. You impress my English cousins whenever I take them out there. They say, this is a real deal right here. So thank you very much. Mike, my salute to you. Thank you very much for your years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We do have an order that we need.
Yeah, so the staff is asking that there be a formal resolution adopted that recognizes the contributions of each of these organizations to the health, welfare, and betterment of Howard Buford Recreation Area.
Thank you, Mike. We have before us then Order 71031-06 in the recognition matter. Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'll move approval of Order 710-3106 in the matter of recognizing the contributions of the partnerships with the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, Friends of Buford Park in Mount Pisgah, and the Sheriff's Mounted Posse in providing stewardship of the Howard Buford Recreational Area.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen. Discussion to the motion. I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Right on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioner, we will step back to item 6A, Health and Human Services, and while we're changing panels at the table, I'll mention that we have 3 announcement items that will move to the afternoon. That's County Council, County Administration, and Commission of Business items will be moved to the afternoon, and we will consider moving the executive session. We have an executive session scheduled as item 11. We'll take a look at that as we approach the break and potentially move that to the afternoon session also. So this morning on item 6A we have before us Ms. Gaffney and Mr. Manella. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I will do a very brief introduction and then turn the presentation over to Steve. We're here today as a follow-up to a discussion that we had earlier this fall as the community has turned to us and asked if there's some solutions that we could provide, particularly in the urban growth boundary area to Eugene and Springfield, to allow for community organizations to permit camping on private property. And so Steve has done yeoman's work in talking with partners and the city about what options there might be. Today we'd like to talk with you about those options and get future direction, and then we'll come back to you with an action item after that.
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. And Mr. Manella, I'm going to mention that this is a report back on the establishment of the pilot program. We do have another agenda item scheduled for November 30th, which potentially could include action. So this is the report back only with no action today. Mr. Manella, please.
Chair Farr, Board of Commissioners, thank you. I would like to first give you an update on our winter plans for shelter, if I could take a moment to do so before I start on my presentation. Beginning tomorrow, November 1st, our winter action plan goes into place, something that the Poverty and Homelessness Board worked on a couple of years ago and allows us to put in place dusk to dawn shelter, which we have both a shelter for individuals and a shelter for families, and those will open tomorrow on November 1st, and they will be in place until March 30. This year, the shelter for individuals is expanding. We will have 80 beds. St. Vincent de Paul is providing that service, and those beds are available to folks without homes in the community. Once again, the Eugene Mission site is hosting a family shelter, and that will begin as well tomorrow. Additionally, our safe parking program that provides for safe parking within the Eugene Springfield city limits will commence, and again, all of those services will be available through the winter months. So I'm here today to update you.
Ms. Manella, just an addition, that the winter response plan, that is 7 days a week from November 1st to March 30th.
Correct, and we also have the Egan Warming Center, which is available if the temperature goes below freezing, like it did this last night, which that will begin as well during this time period.
Thank you very much. Pardon my interruption.
So it's very timely that we're here back to talk about the opportunity to have community members in the River Road, Santa Clara area be able to host folks without homes. We have a number of different people in the community who are interested in this. We have various churches, we have individuals in the community, and we have businesses that are interested in being able to participate in such a program. As we've discussed before, both the City of Eugene and City of Springfield have similar programs that are available within their city limits. When we spoke last, we talked about following up with the City of Eugene staff and discussing the ability to work with them under an intergovernmental agreement. In discussion with the City of Eugene, it was determined that it would be best for the county to enter into a direct agreement for this service. Additionally, in consultation with Andy Clark from County Council and Lydia McKinney from Public Works, the staff is recommending that it not be necessary to establish an ordinance to do this. In fact, in researching the regulatory framework of the City of Eugene established a program and a camping ordinance only because they had on the books a general camping ban, which is a part of their operation. Again, the program agreement for this activity is between the property owner and as host and the individual camper or family, if it were a family. And so that's an agreement which is between the host and St. Vincent de Paul. And so all the liability related to hosting someone is with the individual property owner. Additionally, the property owner signs as part of that contract an agreement that relates to their rights and responsibilities. And legally, if there were to be an issue, they can trespass the individual. And in researching this, we found that the City of Eugene program has not had a problem with enforcement. There is some misunderstanding, and this is an important point for the public in consideration of this, that City of Eugene has two different elements of their program with St. Vincent de Paul. The second element is an enforcement program, which is for people who are camping illegally in the right-of-way. So what this program doesn't do is it doesn't allow people to park on right-of-ways. The enforcement of the right-of-ways continues as it does normally. This is an opportunity for folks to allow folks to camp or park on their property. And as Commissioner Farr mentioned, our intent after discussion today would be to come back with in order to proceed. We have state funding that's available, and we would select a provider to provide oversight for the program.
Thank you, Ms. Manell. And that state funding is the state homeless assistance program, correct? That's
correct. Yes.
About $42,000. Is that the number that?
That's the amount of money that the Human Services Commission has allocated in the case that the board approves this.
Chair Farr, the one piece I would add before we open it up for conversation and questions, I know we've had conversations at the earlier board meeting about the opportunity for public input on this as well. So that's a piece of putting out our next agenda item several weeks so that there would be an opportunity for staff to prepare a presentation, do some meetings in Santa Clara River Road community if the board would like to make sure that people have an opportunity to understand the program, ask questions. As Steve said, there are some differences between what we're talking about here and perhaps all of what the City of Eugene has done, just so we can be clear with people about what the pilot would include before we came back for action.
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. And before we open it up for questions, I have worked with the River Road Neighborhood Association. We've had one meeting so far, which received overwhelming support for the program. Now we'll go out and meet with more folks in the River Road area, and Commissioner Brozovich may talk about meetings that he has had in the Santa Clara difference there is south of Beltline, north of Beltline. Both of which are included in this ordinance. And just a bit of background on the Eugene ordinance. It was first ordained in 2002, and is following a lot of work by a committee, the Council Committee on Homelessness and Youth, which worked through a lot of issues and a lot of iterations of potentially what would become the ordinance, including allowing camping in the industrial area of West Eugene, which didn't work very well. But really, just the basic background is if folks may remember, back in the mid-1990s, 1995, 6, 7, 8, there's a great deal of unauthorized parking in the Whitaker neighborhoods, on Cheshire Street, on I believe Jefferson Street, alongside the parks. And it was really, it was uncontrolled, and there were a great many overnight vehicles, some of which were able to move, some were unable to move, but they were there around the clock. And we began work on addressing legal or sanctioned places for people to actually camp. And there's a lot of input that went into that, a great deal of public input during that point in time. But today you'll find, as you drive through the Whitaker neighborhood, now we're talking 12 years later, did I say 12 years later? Yeah, it's more than that even. It's closer to 20 years later now, oh my gosh. There's really very little unsanctioned parking in that area. And most of that has been relocated to sanctioned parking areas. The Eugene ordinance allows for parking not only in churches and on public land and public parking lots, basically, and also on private parking lots. It allows for driveway and backyard camping, and so it's an ordinance that has been working for a good 15 years at this point in time, and it's evolved. It's been dynamic. Some changes have been made, but consequently, many of the unsanctioned overnight parking has become sanctioned. That does not relieve the issue that we have a lot of unhoused people who are living in their cars. A lot of kids getting up in the morning out of a car to go to school, and finding additional places for people to camp is something that this board has expressed a great deal of interest in, and that's what we're moving forward with today. So thank you very much. Discussion to the presentation. Any questions? Commissioner Bozievich.
So I'll also make note that I did present to the Santa Clara Community Organization, might have been 2 months ago, I can't remember which meeting it was, and had a significant conversation with their members about this program and understanding what it is and what it isn't. And particularly, the first thought is it is going to be people camping in the right of way and anywhere they feel like, and that's not really what it's about. In fact, it's about trying to avoid that situation and getting people into places where they have permission and some oversight. I did attend a forum last week at St. Matthew's Church on homelessness, and quite a lot of support for the program there. And I'm going to be at the Santa Clara Community Organization again Thursday night, and that's at 7 p.m. at Messiah Lutheran on River Road. And I only have a few minutes on the program because I think a state representative for House 14, Julie Fahey, is the major portion of the program. I kind of squeezed myself into it, mostly just so I could get a minute to talk to him, that I'll be coming back out with some other meetings. St. Matthew's has offered their venue to hold a public meeting out there, and we'll look for some other ones where we can maybe bring some staff with us, answer questions about what's being proposed, what isn't being proposed, and get some public input that we can bring back to the board in some fashion for our November 28th decision on whether we want to move forward with the pilot program or not. And I just want to clarify, this isn't actually going to be a county ordinance. It's actually just going to be done under a board order as a pilot program.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, you said ordinance a minute ago. I want to make sure we were clear about that.
I'm referring to the city's ordinance.
Yeah. Which is one of the things that's changed somewhat, because when we were talking about an ordinance, there would be a required public hearing. And that's one of the reasons why I was concerned about making sure we do some outreach to the neighborhoods out there, because we had been all along talking about an ordinance and holding the public hearing in the Santa Clara River Road area where not all of the unincorporated land between the UGB and city limits are, but the majority of it is. There are areas in the North Gillum Road area. There are areas in out Prairie Road. There are even areas in South Eugene Hills that are between the UGB and the city limits. So when we start, I know we've been kind of concentrating on River Road, Santa Clara, but this actually has broader application than that, and it's where the vast majority of that residential, commercially owned churches and all that are that'll be available to expand this program. I'm looking forward to those conversations. I think this is a useful tool in the tool chest to get people in the safe places. During that forum, we had somebody from 4J that's a counselor in the North Eugene area talk about homeless students and the current number of homeless students in the elementary, middle, and high school that serve River Road, Santa Clara, and it's a surprising number at any point in time that kids really don't have a place and they're trying to get to school and concentrate on being on school, and how difficult it is for those children when they're really at a constant stress level. It's really hard to concentrate on school, and they fall behind, and it causes other issues in the long run for those kids. So I think this is just one of those little pieces where we get to ultimately resolving some of these issues with housing supply and homelessness, but this is an easy way we can expand that tool chest.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich, and thank you for your work in public outreach to bring back information. The questions that your neighbors have, are questions that do need to be answered. Further discussion, Commissioner Sorensen.
I just wanted to say thank you for advancing this and keeping it moving, and I hope this pilot will work out, and I think it will, and I think that you're doing a lot to make sure it's successful, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. One thing I'll point out is Eugene does have an ordinance because on the books they've had a no camping law, and an ordinance was needed to really not rescind it, but to work around the no camping law to specifically allow camping in very specific places. And I do have the ordinance open in front of me. It's 4.816. Pretty wordy, but it provides very succinct information for not only the campers, but for the people who wish to allow camping on their graveled or further improved parking lots. And I will mention that we've been talking about Eugene and Lane County at this point in time, but Springfield is doing great work in allowing for camping in parking lots in other areas, and it's really delightful to see what's happened in Springfield. They particularly pay attention to single moms with kids in particular. Commissioner Lakin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, question I have, because this is really the focus on this, and I like the fact that it is a pilot. I think that's going to be key looking at this. So the focus is the urban transition zone. That's correct. And I say that because this does not necessarily work within rural Lane County. So it's got to be within an urban transition zone. I've been dealing with the bug since Friday, so my apologies. My question for you then, because they're really, when you focus on urban transition zones, if I can say it again 3 times maybe as a charm, you're really looking at Eugene and Springfield. Are there other communities that could qualify? So could Cottage Grove qualify? Could Florence qualify? Could Junction City? So that's a question I have, because if this is a pilot, are other communities, are there the similar zones, or is this really going to be more focused on Eugene Springfield? I like the fact that it's Santa Clara River Road. I think that's really a good area, and I just want to say again thank you to both Chair Farr and Vice Chair Bozievich. They really have taken this and ran with it, and I think have done an extraordinary job, really, with the neighborhoods in particular, in the folks that live out there. But going beyond that, I think of places in Springfield that this would qualify. I mean, obviously Glenwood is an area. I think up north and up above the Hayden Bridge Road. That's another area. So, but outside of Eugene Springfield, and I may be looking at my colleague here, Commissioner Williams, who may ultimately have the answer. Would this ultimately work in other communities, and could this potentially be looked at? And I don't know if you've gone that far out or not, or if you investigated that or not, but I think this is something to think of in the future. But right now, I know we need to be focused on this area, especially as a pilot. But I'm really pleased with the work that's being done. I just want to say thank you very much on that.
Thank you. And Chair Farr, Commissioner Lyken, I think that's an excellent question, and I appreciate, too, you lifting up the fact that it's a pilot. I think we'll learn a lot through that process, and that will help us then have information for other communities who might be interested. Really, the lovely thing about this concept is it provides an opportunity for individuals and organizations, businesses, churches who want to be helpful to really step up into that role. I don't know, Steve, if you had anything to add on the rural communities?
No, I think that is, we haven't done anything specifically around this pilot in those areas. However, I would tell you that a subcommittee of the Poverty and Homelessness Board that Commissioner Farr chairs, the Shelter and Supportive Housing Group, has been holding informational sessions around accessory dwelling units, a law that was passed by the legislature that allows for some housing development outside of the urban growth boundary, and some other things that would help this overall housing and homeless situation.
Thank you, Steve. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Commissioners Lyken taking a look at the broader Lane County community. Clearly and unfortunately, homelessness does extend well beyond the metro area. And so I'm particularly grateful that that piece was included for discussion. And I know all of Lane County is eager to see the pilot program work and spread its way across the county. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Further discussion? Then, as we summarize today's work, we're discussing the pilot program. We'll be coming back. It's planned that we come back on November 30th with potential action. I believe you've answered the questions that we have, but I'm going to reiterate a couple of the questions and make certain that my curiosity and that I'm able to answer people's questions. So with the Eugene Camping Ordinance, they've been operating this now for 15 plus years, and anecdotally, I've heard that there is very little public safety response needed, in part because of the contract with St. Vincent de Paul. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, St. Vincent de Paul employs a coordinator for the program, Keith Heath, who he is available, and he is trained to come out and mediate situations. And 99% of the time, those situations are mediated. If somebody needs to move on, they move on. And oftentimes, he'll find another spot for them. So, that is part of what we're paying for, is the oversight of the program. And with the expansion, St. Vincent de Paul would hire on some additional FTE to help with that oversight.
Okay. And the anecdotal that EPD has been rarely, if ever, called as St. Vincent de Paul handles it internally. And I'm noting that the property owner who permits overnight sleeping may revoke the permission at any time.
Yes.
At which point the camper is required to leave the property, which I understand that doesn't happen very often either. So that's once again anecdotal, but I've done a little bit of research on that. The other question is regarding well, it's not a question, it's a comment. We're not inexperienced with car camping on Lane County property. You mentioned earlier our winter response, which we do allow overnight camping in a couple of places in Lane County, notably in the parking lot adjacent to our behavioral health facility. Can you talk about how that works, how that overnight camping works?
Yeah, the difference between the safe parking program and this overnight parking program that St. Vincent de Paul operates for the city of Eugene is that the safe parking program is a program where people park. They come in at 7 p.m. in the evening and then they leave in the morning before the work begins over at Lane County Behavioral Health. And the overnight parking program allows the camper or the person who's parked to stay there 24/7. And so that's the difference between the two programs. They're both similar in that they allow people a safe place to be in a vehicle, and it also provides for sanitation, by having porta potties and having waste receptacles available on site.
Excellent. And then just one clarification. Once again, we aren't required to have an ordinance, so we're not pursuing the ordinance route. This will be by board order and by agreement between the host and the camper. That's where the agreement lies, and then, which is also a contract with St. Vincent de Paul to more or less administer the program. So the as far as the types of property that would be allowed for this, as we've mentioned earlier, there'd be no parking in right-of-way at any time. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that the parking lots would be improved parking lots, either gravel or better. And that while we're not pursuing an ordinance, the provisions in Eugene's ordinance 4.816, many of those provisions in that ordinance will be wrapped into the language that we use in our board order, I would expect. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, I think, Chair Farr, that would be in the description of the program, certainly, and then really the delegated authority to sign that contract with the organization that would ultimately supervise the program.
And that is Eugene Ordinance 4.816, which is available online. So thank you. Mr. Mokrajewski, I believe we've conducted our deliberation for this item today. Anything you'd like to add?
I think it's all been covered.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. We're moving forward. We're not exactly in uncharted territory because we've observed our sister jurisdiction doing it, and we have actually engaged in increasingly more and more winter response for people who otherwise would have no sanctioned places to stay overnight. So thank you very much for the work. Thank you, Mr. Manella. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. We look forward to seeing you again on November 30th. Mr. Manella, I mentioned that we'll probably push announcements, County Council, County Administration, and Commission of Business announcements to the afternoon. However, we finished this item a little bit prior to what at the time I'd anticipated. So remaining on our calendar right now, before noon, we have the three announcements that I just mentioned, including agenda team requests and an executive session. So how should we move forward? Would you like to move forward with the announcements at this point in time and potentially push the executive session?
Are there any county council announcements? We have an exec session today.
Okay.
I'm happy to hold my announcements till this afternoon if you want to conduct commissioners' business, and then we can go into exec session.
Then let's move along to item 10A, which is commissioners' business announcements. Any announcements from the commissioners? Well, we didn't need to move these after all, did we?
I got an agenda.
Okay, Commissioner Bozevich.
Well,
agenda team request, not quite. Just one quick announcement. We're talking about a camping pilot program in the River Road and Santa Clara area. Last week we kicked off what is a refinement plan for the River Road Santa Clara neighborhoods, and it is in conjunction with the cooperation between the county and the city. Over 400 people attended the kickoff, and very robustly attended. I'm pretty excited about the work that we'll be doing with the city surrounding public safety, transportation, land use, camping, and various things that come up in the urban transition. What we're calling the urban transition is the area that is inside the urban growth boundary but outside the city of Eugene. Of particular importance to Commissioner Bozevich and I, because many of our constituents live in that area. So that happened last week. I'm looking forward to that moving forward, Mr. Mokrahajski. Then we'll move along then to agenda team requests. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I'd like to get head nods from my fellow commissioners to add an item, and it's going to have to come up really quickly because this deals with insurance, and we're in open enrollment right now, so we have a deadline of November 17th to try and take it. So we need to take action far enough ahead of that some of our employees can react. But I think we need to have a conversation very quickly about the non-rep employees and their insurance and see if we can maybe get some continuity, or not continuity, but consistency in how we're doing insurance amongst all of our employee groups. Now that we've just recently got the AFSCME units consistent with the other 5 bargaining units, we have some non-reps that are paying significantly more and some that are paying nothing. So I think there needs to be some cleanup done there. And if we're going to do it in time to have it be under this open enrollment, it'll have to come up probably next week. So staff will have to kind of rush on that. At the same time, also like to talk a little bit about non-rep compensation and making sure we don't end up 8 years from now having that same horrible conversation we had a couple of years ago about trying to play catch-up, how it will look in the press to kind of try and make that kind of catch-up with our salary ranges, and basically putting ourselves in a quandary. So how we can continue to be more doing smaller steps more often than putting off dealing with the non-rep compensation. So if we could get head nods from my fellow commissioners to have a conversation next week about non-rep health insurance and benefits and compensation coming up in the future, I'd appreciate it.
So this is a request for an agenda item for the November 7th regular board meeting. Do I have concurrence? Then that Mr. Mokrahajski will add that to the agenda that we talked about this morning, to the tentative agenda that we discussed at the agenda team this morning. Okay. Excellent.
So just so I'm clear, there's a desire to maintain consistency both with the health insurance plans and the cost of living type adjustments that have been done for the other 7 bargaining units with non-represented employees.
Okay. Consistency being the operative word there. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Any other agenda team requests? I see none. Then we do have a need for an executive session today. After the executive session, we will return at 1:30 for our afternoon agenda. So today's executive session, the sound of my gavel, we'll reconvene in executive session in the Board of Commissioners conference room approximately 5 minutes after the sound of the gavel. And Commissioner Bozievich, I may ask you to convene the meeting if I'm not quite there for the beginning of it. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in the executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. We will reconvene as in general session of the Board of County Commissioners at 1:30. We are recessed.